The supreme motivating concept of the future is synergy. Men and women of all nations coming together under leaders of great vision. Who sees the pursuit of a common idea, one world, one earth, one people, is the reason for all existence. Hi, and welcome to Inside Game of Gods. I am Leanne Tykert, your co-host, and I just read a quote from Desmond Berghofer, and I want to know, why is that the start of the book?
Well, that's a good question. I met Desmond Berghofer at the Global Citizenship 2000 Youth Congress, which is how how that chapter of the book starts, by going to this particular event. This was an event that happened in 1997, and we cover it in more detail in Chapter 2. But I had to wrestle with a starting point for the chapter. I had to wrestle with a starting point because that sets the tone for everything. And so Desmond Berghofer was the man who hosted the Global Citizenship 2000 Youth Congress.
Ah, okay.
Yes, he hosted the event. He, along with a small staff, they brought in Robert Mueller from the United Nations, at that time a retired official with the United Nations, to talk to all these school children, to talk to educators, community leaders, about the World Core curriculum that Robert Mueller had written, and the idea of integrating that World Core curriculum into Canada's education system. And so Desmond Berghofer, he worked with UNESCO in the past. He worked with, I think, the Alberta Department of Education. And for him, the Global Citizenship Congress was all about living out the book that he wrote called Visioneers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Visioneering. And Visioneering, that was a section out of that book. And so it was a novel that he wrote about young people, school children, who are global change agents, and how they interact with world leaders to push forward for social justice and one world and the globe coming together. And so in a way, what we were doing at this Congress was modeling what Berghofer had written in his book. It was like a wish fulfillment for him.
Okay. All right. Well, the chapter's called Vision of One.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that's oneness, the vision of oneness when it comes together, the common idea, the one world, the one earth, the one people.
Right.
What do they think the benefits of that is?
Peace. Peace, unity, harmony, all that goes into the ideals that we see in things like the New Age movement, concepts of if we could all come together as one, there would be no more strife. There would be no more conflict. We'd all realize our divinity. That's a part of this too. There's a supernatural or a spiritual side to it. We're coming together as what Robert Mueller described as being the planet of God. That's what Robert E. Mueller wrote in his book, New Genesis. And so he was telling the school children at this event that you are all divine. You're all divine energy. We all come together as one, so we save the planet. So we come together and bring about world peace. It's a grand vision. It's a great ideal. It's pie in the sky. It takes away from the fact that human nature is fundamentally flawed, and we cannot be good enough to do this on our own. But if we do it collectively, if we do it through government,
The more the merrier?
Kind of, yeah. The more the merrier. Yeah, if we reconstruct our new, if we do the Tower of Babel right this time.
Okay, can I just throw a thing in here? Since when? When in history? By adding more bodies and more voices and more thoughts and more opinions, has that ever made anything better?
Well, I mean, yeah, you're right. The history is loaded with all kinds of political, social, and religious experiments in collective living and collective harmony. And typically it runs into the shore in a hard way and breaks apart. They don't last.
Okay.
Because it's built on either humanistic principles or spiritual principles that don't don't honestly build a culture that is sustainable or stable. It's illusionary. The ideal here of world peace, this oneness, we're all going to realize our divinity, we're all going to become one planet, it's all going to be, we're building heaven on earth, is illusionary. It takes away the idea, or disconnects the idea of individual sin and the very fact that we have a God who is outside of creation, outside of the created order, who has a moral standard that we can't reach. And so we constantly are building utopias, or hoping to build a utopia, or better yet, maybe a Tower of Babel, a type of Babel, and shaking our fists saying, yeah, we will arise, we will build our heaven on earth, we will save the earth, we will save ourselves. It's up to us. From the New Age perspective, you're God, you just forgot you're God.
I love that.
I know, and I've run into that. You've run,
yeah. Okay, question for you. I know we've talked about this a little bit earlier, about how you struggle with introductions.
Yes, I do.
Okay, always.
Always.
This being the first chapter, was this a struggle?
No, in that I knew I needed to put the Global Citizenship 2000 Congress as my starting point. I knew the first sentence, welcome global citizens, that I knew. But then I wanted to devote an entire chapter just to this, so I had to break it off at some point and then dive into the worldview behind it. That was where the struggle was, where I made the break, which is I think only like the next page in. I made the break and jumped into what oneness looks like, how oneness is portrayed in different thought forms.
Popular
culture. Oprah
was a big one.
Eckhart Tolle. I mean, I've got Eckhart Tolle's New Earth here. This was one of the books that helped me just see it from a popular cultural point of view, specifically because of how Oprah endorsed this book and this
and the
this
influence
author.
that she is in society today is just huge.
Enormous.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so then there's a part of the chapter that I want to talk about a little bit more, if you don't mind, and that was one of the books that you used. It's called Stealing Fire. I think you have it here somewhere.
Yeah, I do.
Right on. Okay, so tell me about this book. This was a very influential book in your mind.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I have spent a lot of time wrestling through what oneness is by reading New Age literature, authors who are either pagans or authors who are occultists. Some Christian authors, as they've been working through what this looks like as well. What I basically try to do is take a large body of material that supports their perspective, the oneness perspective, and then take another body of material in the middle that kind of, you would say, critiques it, but even critiques it from within their own community.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, because they have to wrestle with this too. And then take material from a Christian point of view that also critiques it and offers an alternative, offers the biblical alternative. And so I'm wrestling with these three, you could call it three bodies of knowledge, or three areas of interest regarding a particular subject. And this Stealing Fire was kind of one of those middle ground books.
Okay.
Where it endorsed a sense of oneness in a way. It actually talks more about the neuroscience of oneness, how there is the brain chemistry behind the feeling, and this is something that Oprah and Eckhart Tolle and other promoters of oneness, this is where we go to. It's a feeling, you're experiencing it.
And how do you argue with a feeling?
Bingo. How do you argue with an experience? How do you argue with any of those very nebulous kind of concepts now?
And we have talked to many, many people about that whole concept of, okay, what is this feeling?
Right.
What causes the feeling? And how do you address or confront, or not, that's not the word I'm looking for, but...
Respond?
Okay, that's it. How do you respond to people who have had an experience that is so solidified in their memory...
Right.
And
it's changed them.
And it's changed them completely, as some people put it, 90 degrees, turned 90 degrees around and never look back. How do you respond to these kind of people who now have the worldview that is, by experience, Oneness.
I know. And that we tackle halfway through the book. We do tackle that in one of the chapters of the book.
Right.
A response to oneness.
Okay.
As we unpack what it looks like, even from a reasoning, logical position, what I appreciated about Stealing Fire by Kotler and Wheel. Now, keep in mind, they're not Christians. It's not a Christian book, but they go through the neuroscience of it. And what I appreciated is they recognize that, yes, there is a scientific explanation for some of the mystical feelings people receive. The feelings people receive if they are extreme sports participants. All of a sudden, they're in what's called the zone, and there is a neurochemical, there is an experience that happens neurologically as all of a sudden you're clicking.
Yeah.
And it just works. I've been there.
I've been there too.
I know you've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an amazing thing.
It is.
All of a sudden, it's like a sense of timelessness.
Yeah.
There's a feeling where you are connected in. It's really a very interesting place to be.
It's a very invigorating,
right,
and exciting.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're like,
exciting feeling.
wow, how did this work?
Yeah.
It just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine was on the track and field running. It was like all of a sudden I hit this stride and it just clicked and I blew by everybody.
You're in the zone.
I was in a zone.
Right.
And it
right.
never happened again. I was like, dang.
And I've had that feeling sport biking.
Yes.
Really tearing it up. All of a sudden, it's clicking going around certain corners, and you feel like you are one with the motorcycle, and you are one with the road.
And you just know exactly how and when and where, and
right.
It just goes.
Right. Now, there is a spiritual component to this, because through meditation techniques, and Stealing Fire goes into that, you're also now unlocking some of those same neurochemical pathways. You're unlocking that same feeling now through techniques of meditation. And so they go into the religious component, they go into the spiritual component, they go into the science of it. And this was important because I had to start wrestling through oneness, not any longer from the position of, the writings of Eckhart Tolle, or Neil Donald Walsh, or Robert Mueller, or any of these others, but now had to kind of take it from a different angle. And I found that really, really helpful because it forced me to think about this a little bit differently.
Okay.
And I appreciated that.
We were talking about
Oh,
something this morning.
right. One of the things, too, before I forget, one thing that these guys do is they unpack how this is an industry.
Oh.
And I bring that up just very, very briefly. I just touch on that in chapter 1 of the book. That indeed the sense of oneness or connection or this feeling, it is an industry. It's the idea of getting out of your own body, getting out of your own head, whether you want to incorporate, let's say, a whole range of industries, everything from yoga and health to mindfulness.
Cryogenics?
Well, no, that would be in a different zone. That falls into the transhumanist side.
Okay.
It could include even things like the purchase of alcohol, other products that help all of a sudden move you away from where you were, move you out of your consciousness into another form of consciousness.
Really?
Taking you out of yourself. And they do a good job of unpacking this as an industry. So it's kind of a fascinating thought, fascinating process. And it forced me to think through one thing that is, and this is a little off the topic, but we've had some hard discussions, especially with some younger people. How does this look like with Christian worship when we all have this feeling, this feeling of oneness, this feeling of worship, this feeling of connection? And the typical language is, well, God had to have been here. God was moving. And this was one of those...
I felt him on my skin.
Yeah, we had a conversation with a young man, I know, who was saying, I felt God crawling on my skin, and I felt God moving through my hair, and I was breathing God in and breathing God out. Hold on here. We need to start unpacking some of this. And so this book was helpful from a non-Christian point of view, from a critical, both accepting of oneness, but critical of it. And it was an interesting wrestling match that I had to go through. It helped me to start thinking through, in some different ways, how oneness looked as I was writing chapter 1.
Okay, so when we were talking this morning, getting ready to do this show, we were discussing some of the book, and we happened to run across a footnote on page 20, number 57.
Yep.
I remember that. And it was talking about a book title called Liberty, or equality. And do you remember what I said?
Yeah, that the hairs kind of stood up for you. That
Yeah.
kind of creeped you out.
The whole footnote creeped me out because the title of that book is just mind-blowing. Liberty or equality. And if you really think about what that says, that's scary.
Yeah, let me just have to jump into. I have to jump into the chapter, kind of to remind myself of what that footnote actually is about.
It's about books that you used.
Right. Okay, to help understand the role of democracy as a process of conditioning. And then I have a number of books that I have had that have helped me to understand democracy, because there are aspects of oneism, aspects of this worldizing culture where it always pokes back at democracy. We're going to have a world democracy. We're going to have a mass of people who will bring about type of one world through a democratic process. So I had to wrestle through what democracy was about. And there's a few of the books that helped challenge my thinking on things like democracy, like governance, both in pro and con ways. And one of them was the book Liberty or Equality by Eric von Kuhn-Leyden. That was one of them. And he's making the argument that equality, which is the essence of the democratic principle in some respects, that the equality, we end up becoming a grand mush.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
don't you dare rise above the herd. It's a herd mentality.
well, isn't that what they're doing in schools now? Like, you can't fail. You can't... everybody gets a prize.
And if all of a sudden you're challenged in the fact that you're actually below the grade, if you're challenged in that respect, now you play a victim card.
Oh. Well, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, we do. We play the victim card.
If I'm not as good as you and I'm not as good as everybody else,
If I haven't quite fit into the herd, I play the victim card. And if you rise above the herd, well, then
you're beat down.
You're beat down.
Because we can't have that.
Right.
Holy.
This is one of the important parts of the book, is the footnotes, as crazy as that might seem. Like chapter 1, there's a number of good materials in there to help the reader if they want to dive into these subjects. It's not that I'm endorsing every book in my footnotes. I'm not.
No.
My footnotes are meant to help you wrestle with things.
Right.
Flat out. I may agree or disagree. I may agree in part and disagree in huge parts, or vice versa, whatever. Doesn't matter. These are materials that help me unpack some of the thinking used in chapter 1.
Right.
Now, I know we talked about Stealing Fire and a few other of the books. I'd like to just flip over a bit onto the Christian side.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there was a number of Christian books and Christian authors that was helpful for me as I was wrestling through what oneism looked like, or oneness, and its counterpart, which is a biblical worldview. The worldview that says God is distinct, unique, other. There is a divide between the creation and the creator.
Right.
And because of that, we have value. Because reality is not one. Reality has distinctions, separating points. In fact, that's the only way we can discover value, is by recognizing different worth, different, you could almost say, the comparative points between things. So some of the books that were helpful for myself, especially on the question of oneism versus twoism, and that's Peter Jones's language, which I really have appreciated. Dr. Peter Jones is the author of One or Two.
I'll hold these.
Yeah, hold them up. The Other Worldview was very helpful, and same with his book Capturing the Pagan Mind. I would, if you're a Christian wrestling through questions of the New Age movement, the occultism, just the general worldview we see today in our culture, the dominant worldview of oneism, because that is a dominant worldview, I would recommend diving into the work that Peter Jones does. For me, it was good because I already knew the difference, I understood the difference, but he helped frame it. He helped me uncover how the language of that looks, and that was important. Because it's one thing to know it in your head, it's another thing to be able to express it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I've read this one. And
Yep.
No, not that one. The other one.
One or two.
One or two. This one. I
Yes.
read this one. I don't read much, but I read this one. And it was very well explained.
Yeah. He articulates these two worldviews that are in conflict. He articulates them very, very well. Doug Guteit's old book, I think this is like 1986. Even though it's an older book on the subject of the New Age, he really does a great job of just laying out what oneness looks like and what it means, and how it frames itself in the way people think. So that was really good. Warren Smith. When I was writing chapter 1, I spent some time with Warren at a conference we were both speakers at. Really appreciate Warren's testimony, and his book, The Light That Was Dark, is just a great read. In terms of
a little bit longer,
right? In terms of
splash.
In terms of a testimony of somebody who was a onist,
Yes.
and who ended up walking out of the New Age movement, and then what that looked like. And I thought that it was a really handy way for me to see it from the point of view of somebody who was there and now has walked away from it.
And Warren is such a sweet man.
Yes, absolutely. Greg Hammond's book, Mystic Seduction, was helpful in terms of just understanding what mysticism looks like as he was wrestling at it from a Christian point of view. Again, these are all ideas that I have encountered, that I've worked through as well, but it's always good to find somebody else who is wrestling with it as well, because iron sharpens iron.
Absolutely.
And then a book, and it's well tagged.
All your books are well tagged.
Yeah, I know. Jacques Ellul, I don't always understand what he writes. Okay. He was a French theologian. He's been gone for a while. His thinking is good. His thinking is deep. There's some things in there I wrestle with. All right, what exactly do you mean? Because he's gone, I'll never, we'll all be wrestling through some of what he was writing. But his book, The New Demons, published in the early 70s, I believe, helped me to understand that secularism is really only a transitionary period between one dominant world religion or one dominant worldview being pushed aside by the culture, allowing another one to take its place.
And it's a spiritual. It has to be a spiritual worldview.
Right, because secularism really becomes just a vacuum point, a hinge, a short in-between period, as we reject one religious worldview, the Christian worldview specifically in the West. As we reject that, we enter into a short phase of secularist thinking, where secularism seems to start arising up. The new atheists, it seems to arise up. All of a sudden, atheism is a powerful, moving, dominant force. That's what it seems for a short time. Because all of a sudden what you're seeing is a new religion that follows, or an old religion taking now a more dominant place, which is paganism.
And that's because we can't help ourselves.
We are spiritual beings.
Spiritual beings.
We are spiritual beings.
Right on.
So it's not God. It's not the 1966 Time magazine big headline, God is dead. That was when secularism is almost in that point of we've rejected Christianity, now we're entering this new secular point, and no, God is not dead, and now instead it's this quest for spirituality, which is what chapter 1 really starts to lay out, this constant quest for this spirituality of oneness.
I hope, as you've been listening to us banter back and forth, that you will understand now a little bit behind Game of Gods and what's gone into it. We're really looking forward to spending some more time with you in the next episodes as we go through the next chapters. Please tune in and remember to do a review on Amazon if you've read the book. And if you like and what everybody says about their videos on YouTube or whatever platform, please give us a like and subscribe if you are wanting to keep my face in front of you. There we go. So on that note, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.